Okay, welcome everyone. This is Surviving Scaled Agile, and it's two meetup groups from Sweden that are getting together. Hope it's okay that this is in English. We have some of the guests today are from the US. And basically, this is your roadmap to success. And we're going to do brief introductions here. Hans and I are your host, guides, and facilitators today. And Hans, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Andrew. So my name is Hans Gillior, and I'm a facilitator of the Meetup group, Digital Transformation Stockholm. And I hope some of the participants are coming from that Meetup group. My background is that I work as a management consultant, a senior advisor when it comes to digital transformation, and especially looking at the human aspects, leadership, governance, these kind of questions. I have known Andrew for a couple of years actually, and I attended one of his meetups. Yeah, I attended one of his meetups groups and got really interested in this agile governance and flow. So I'm a happy certificate of that framework. So a little bit about me.
And my name is Andrew Kallman, and I'm the host and facilitator for the Agile governance community of practice in Stockholm, even though I'm in Jakobstad, Finland. So right now we're remote from Jakobstad in Finland. So for those from Sweden that know where Umeå is at, we're right across the water from there, pretty much straight across. So I'm in the Swedish-speaking part of Finland. I'm the co-author of Flow, and I've been working with helping companies achieve incredible value and remarkable results for the better part of 25 years. Suddenly I feel a little older. It's really good that you're all here today. We're up to around 18, it looks like, participants, which is awesome. I'm glad you're here. For those that weren't able to make it, we're recording this so that you can participate a little bit later. Hans and I were chatting a few weeks ago, and we were sort of chuckling about, the things that we were running into with companies doing Agile. And we said, man, we should have a meetup, a joint meetup about this. And so that gave the birth to the idea of doing the survey. And we've gotten some really interesting results from the survey. And so we've done the introductions. We won't have time to introduce everybody. But this is basically the outline. We're going to look at the results of the survey and the brutal facts. And it's really interesting. Then we're going to look a little bit at Agile transformation. That's your roadmap to success, how to survive. And then Hans is going to share with us both a customer case and the process that we use to help companies as we're going through this. So it gives you a little bit of idea of how we do things. And then we're going to open it up to questions and answers. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't know which side on your computer it's on, but you can type your question into the chat and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible before our time is up today. So once again, thanks everyone for being here. And now we're going to get into the heart and soul of what today is all about. So this first section is the Scaled Agile survey results, and we're going to look at the brutal facts. And that picture there, we're going to go into that in a little bit more depth in just a little bit. I wanted to share some of the results of the survey. Microsoft Forms does a halfway decent job of generating some reports for us, so I was actually quite pleased. We had 19 people respond to the survey, and this survey went out to the two groups, which is about 1,000 people in total. So we got about a 0.2% response rate. And in this group, it looks like about 2/3 of everybody is using SAFe, which I find very interesting, but makes sense if people are using SAFe and they want to find out how to survive Scaled Agile. But we didn't want to leave the other methodologies out. So we checked and put the list there. Do you use LESS or DAD or Enterprise Scrum or any of the dozen or so methodologies that are out there? What I found interesting is that we got 3 responses where people went, I don't know. I thought that was pretty good. And also that there were hybrids that people are using. And then there was one person using Nexus and one person using LESS or large scale Scrum. At the end of this slide deck, and the slide deck will be available to everybody in PDF format afterwards. I'll put up a spot on my website where you'll be able to get the slide deck. We're gonna do a short video based on everything that we shared today, just a summary video, maybe 5 minutes long, of the high points of what we found. The whole video will also be made available in case you want to go back and look at a certain part of it. But these are the results and the brutal facts from the survey. Hans, go ahead, because you were the first one to really nail these. And I was just like going, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, but thank you, Andrew. I mean, when we started out doing this, we sort of had an hypothesis that many of the organization was struggling with SAFe. We had visited a number of companies and SAFe professionals, and they more or less told the same story about how challenging it was. So when we received the results, it was more or less confirming our hypothesis about how that was. But the first fact that we could state was that 84% of the digital professionals, the ones that are implementing SAFe, are experiencing severe difficulties in implementing this Scaled Agile, the Agile way of working, which is quite interesting. Why is it severe? We can see that the scores on the scale from 1 to 7 are very, very low on how they perceive the implementation itself and how they go about doing it. And there's a lot of friction in there, and we come back to why this is. But 84% is almost 8, 9 out of 10 that are struggling severely. The other fact was also quite interesting, that 74% of the digital professionals, those implementing SAFe, stated they have no way of measuring the effects of Agile way of working or Scaled Agile, meaning that they have very limited measurements or matrix measuring the effects of what they're doing. And in most cases, they don't have any executive dashboard for measuring and now doing analysis or reporting to support these main stakeholders. And this is obviously a big problem because it's very difficult to gain the confidence and trust of senior management if you cannot show the effects of what you're doing. Why should they invest more money in something that does not generate any sort of benefits? The third brutal fact that we found was that 74% of the digital professionals state that the key challenges of implementing this Scaled Agile, the Agile way of working, is not really linked to processes and tools, but rather to common vision, knowledge sharing, cross-border collaboration, culture, leadership, training, experience. And that's quite interesting, that these are the factors that actually impact the effectiveness of SAFe, or Agile way of Scaled Agile. So it very much confirmed our own hypothesis and our own views about how things worked, which is quite interesting. And also that having challenges implementing SAFe is not an individual company problem. It's a quite common problem. It's for the whole Scaled Agile community that are struggling to implement this. And therefore, I think it's important that we try to understand why that is and what tools can we do, how can we help and support to decrease the 84% to maybe 20 or 10%. And that is sort of our mission with this. So I hope I summarized it right, Andrew.
Yeah, that was good. All right. I was answering one of the questions that has already come up in the background here. Continue, because you already covered this, but this is the actual picture.
Yeah, and this is really interesting, because we actually asked what are the main hinders or obstacles for achieving an effective scaling agile and getting the full benefits out of this. And we actually listed a number of different factors, a number of different competences or capabilities, and we asked to rate them 1 through 7. And there's only two of 18, I think it was, that are actually on the green side, that actually is contributing to this to the effectiveness of Scaled Agile. The rest of them are more or less hindering an implementation of Scaled Agile, which is quite interesting. And if you look at the lower end, those who are most severe have most effect on the implementation effects were definitely, the ones that we have looked at before. It's a friction, it's a culture, it's dashboards, measuring cultural leadership, and these kind of topics. Those are the most severe ones, which we find really, really interesting. But we must say that, all these 18, 16 of them are actually are having a negative effect on safe implementation, which is quite interesting. Can you take the last one, Andrew?
Yeah, and following up on that, 16 of 18 here are either red, orange, or yellow. In the end, in the additional slides, you can see each question with a little corresponding color dot, so you don't have to go back and forth between this slide and those slides in the extra slides at the end. The dotted line was something that just popped out to me, because they rated servant leadership as 4th lowest, which I found very interesting. When you look at over here, one of the top 2, which were green, it says my organization leadership is personally involved in leading the transformational change. So they're personally involved. But you could almost, and I'm not going to put words in people's mouths, but what popped out is that servant leadership was extremely low. So they're leading, but we're not sure they're doing actually the right things that will enable the culture and enable the vision to be achieved in what they're trying to do. So as I was looking at this, I was just, and as Hans already mentioned, 16 of 18 areas are either totally up in flames, burning a little bit, or pretty close to starting to ignite. And so basically anything under 4 out of 7, we were looking at that like, oh, wow. For these 19 different companies, I'm assuming that they're all different companies, up to 19 different companies, for them to reflect this, I'm looking at this, and based on my past experience working with recovering projects for SAFE, or assignments for SAFE that had gone up in flames, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this really mirrors extremely well what we've run into over and over and over again. So what's really cool about this survey is we could literally do it inside a company, for a company. And I would almost expect to get a chart or a graph at the end that would just basically mirror what we see right here. I think that this is pretty representative of the challenges and everything that the companies are up against when they're trying to get through Scaled Agile. And we're going to get into some of the reasons why it's such a challenge in just a little bit. But you're gonna get a copy of this. You can take a look at each of the questions at the end if you want more detail. And you can then look at the summary slide and get a good feel and start to think about, how does my organization compare to this? Would we look the same as this? And so our conclusion for this is that there's a lot of work to be done. to be able to help the safe implementations actually succeed. And my gut feeling is that this is pretty representative of where we would run into things like this, both in Scandinavia and the US. By the way, about half of the participants responded from Scandinavia, a little bit over half, and the rest were from Finland and the United States and other parts of the world. So Sweden answered the most on the survey. So from a Swedish perspective, I think this is going to be very, very reflective of what we're running into in Sweden and Scandinavia.
I can add something there as well. I think, I mean, if you look at these different competences or capabilities that we see here, the 18 of them and the 16 that are hindering this, most of them are things that we can foresee as a problem. I mean, even before we start a Scale and Agile project, we can evaluate whether these will be obstacles or not, because they are quite generic for almost more companies. So this is one of the hypotheses we can do as well, that we can pre-qualify Agile scale product before it starts to see actually where the challenges are to actually get a better implementation based on this.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you're going to walk them through how we do that a little bit further down in the slides. Mm-hmm. Now, this for me, this was really like not an aha moment, as we would call it in flow, but more like just a really solid confirmation of, yeah, that's about what I expected. So I think this was really good. And by the way, for anyone that's online that actually participated in the survey, thank you. We really appreciate the input. I don't want to feel like anyone feels like we underappreciate their input, because we really appreciate the work that people did. On the average, it took people about 7.5 minutes to complete the survey. So it's not like it was a huge effort, but we really do appreciate people taking their time to participate. It's really appreciated. So we took, question 20 was sort of an open-ended question, and this was fun. Hans, do you want to take the first? We'll alternate. You take the first bullet point, I'll take the next, and we'll walk them through it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, these are, as you said, open-ended question where people can a little bit comment about how the Scale Agile was implemented and some comments around that. And the first one was obviously around culture, about having the right culture, and that was sort of the key piece of the puzzle that would help everything else sort of fall into place. And that only emphasizes the importance of having the right atmosphere, culture in the organization to actually make the best out of the Scale Agile. And that is a comment we get over and over and over again, the importance of culture.
Exactly. What warmed my heart is obviously somebody who's done the flow training did the survey, because the next one is, they said, we need a 7-word or less flow-based vision statement. Absolutely correct. And, but I like the next one that I found. I just sort of grouped these together. Ensure that the organization's vision aligns with the team's vision. So that's also probably somebody that had taken the flow training and understands cascading vision and how to link everything back so that the communication channels are there.
The third one, I think, is also really interesting. I mean, all of them are interesting per se, but saying that it's the C-level commitment which plays an important part in this is a key success factors in implementing Scaled Agile. And what we see mainly in many companies is that Scaled Agile or implementing SAFe starts from a sort of grassroots level, where people are empowered to license themselves in these frameworks, and then automatically just start revolutionizing the way of working from below somehow. And that is a problem since they don't get the C-level commitment in doing this, and not the C-level's understanding and awareness about their own role in this, of their own role in fostering the right agile culture and mindset. So we see a little bit of struggle between different layers in the organization, the C-levels, managers, and the team about this. So it's quite interesting that this is something that is raised by many people as well.
Cool. And I liked one of the comments, by the way, in that one, because it talked about living the company's agile values. And in Flow, we talk about talking the talk versus walking the talk. And so it's really important for those leaders to model the behavior and the change that they want to see in their organization. We'll start over on the right column now. Getting the entire organization moving in the same direction, in the same way, at the same time. Thank you. That's almost straight off the book cover. I love it. And so gaining that understanding of Agile throughout the entire organization, everywhere, that's a lot of work. And to do that, that means you've got scaling efforts, which would include rollout, but it also includes transformation efforts, which is mindset. And so we're going to get into that in a little bit here. Because it's really important to exhibit the leadership and the mindset, not just at the highest levels, but even in the middle layers with the management. I thought it was very interesting that somebody mentioned decouple development from funding of particular requests. I thought that was really good. But the reality is that there's really 4 whys to do things. For an organization, it's do the right thing, increase revenues, save costs, get rid of or mitigate risk. Those are what we call the 4 whys. And so decoupling development from those 4 whys, I wouldn't go that far, but it was a very interesting comment. And I love the next one. Magically get the organization to think first principles about what agile scaling is actually all about. And there was one of the Agile Manifesto original signers, I can't remember which one right now, when they were asked about Scaled Agile, they said, that's the last thing you should do. And they just left it at that. This was at a conference in 2013, and everybody started laughing because there's at least two ways you can look at that. It's either never try to scale, or only scale once you have functioning teams that are doing Agile really well and being Agile, not just doing, okay? So I'll try to use some of the Agile terminology so the purists don't go off the rails here. And then removing silos. In really large organizations, it's amazing the difficulty of cross-silo communications. And using Agile with DevOps, you can start to get to the digitalization that you want to achieve. And you need those two, or your digitalization efforts are going to be a challenge, okay? Because we want to bring in the digitalization part. But these cross-silo parts can be really challenging and really difficult to correct and to break through and create communications at the right levels between those silos. And in a perfect world, you get rid of the silos. But a majority of the people I've worked with at most of the organizations I work with, they're anything but perfect. Not many people get to work for Amazon or Google or Facebook or whoever. The rest of us have to work in the real world. So go ahead with the next one, Hans.
Yeah, immerse training to solidify Scrum Master and Coach foundation and practices. I think this is also an interesting topic to discuss. I see that too many companies are pushing out quite easy trainings and certifications to their staff and wanting them by themselves to, based on that knowledge, implement this agile way of working, or Scaled Agile in some way. I think that the true people that actually are have an in-depth knowledge about Scrum and Agile and understand that there's a bigger picture here that needs to be managed. So I think that you need more experienced people to have actually done this journey a number of times to actually get the full benefit of it. It's not a matter of reading a book and implementing a few processes. This is a cultural change. This is a business change that we are standing in front of. And therefore you need to have more in-depth experience and coaching abilities to see the full picture of that.
Exactly. The last one here of the, this was, by the way, was question 20, all of these responses of the, what's the one thing you would change if you could change one thing? And these last two here, don't know, and one person left the field blank. That's as valuable as all the other comments, because many times people are just totally, I haven't got a clue what would be the one thing that could make all the difference in the world so that we could actually do the cultural change, do the transformation, do the change management, everything that has to go with. I really appreciated that transparency and honesty, where it's just like, I don't know. So it was really, really good. Cool. So once again, it was, if you look at some of these responses as compared to those, you know, you had friction, you had culture. I'm trying to remember the other one that we had here. Hold on. The friction, the dashboard, and the culture, and the servant leadership. I think almost all of that is captured in these final comments on question 20 that we had. So as I mentioned, you're going to be able to see, this is the summary for question 20. But all the other questions, you've got snapshots of them with the associated color with them with a little dot next to it, so that you can look at the question and review the details if you want to. And those are at the end of the slides. Well, okay, so surviving, how to survive. And this is coming straight from Flow. And this is based on, oh man, years and years of real world, real life experience working with the various models and methodologies. So we're going to dive into this T shape here into the in the next slides. So here's what we're up against, and I think this is one of the key areas. And when you look at the level of friction that people are encountering, it's because they're focused on the left-hand side of the T, the tool set view, okay? And to successfully scale Agile, it's not an either or, it's a both and. You got to do both, okay? So if you're only doing scaling or rollout and you think that that's going to work, you're putting yourself at a very high risk for failing and going down in flames, okay? Now, the skill sets for doing both of these are sometimes competing competencies, and sometimes they overlap because it requires both management. Here's the big pile of work we got to get done, and oh, I got a tool set that helps me get it done. Great. Okay, that's the management hard work side of it. The mindset is the leadership level, the transformation, the culture, the values, the attitudes. And it's really interesting, okay, because here you've got the tool set, okay, agile methods and agile frameworks. Now, when you take SAFe is predicated on every team doing at least Scrum or Scrumban or Kanban or something at the team level in a consistent way that can be rolled up into the next level, because really SAFe is a program level, touches into portfolio a little bit, but it's primarily a program level tool for managing super huge efforts. And this is the same for less, it's just how you structure them. but in the end, Nexus and things like that, they all start looking alike. The in the tool set part, external behavior modification has been my observation of what's happening. Okay, so they do extrinsic motivators and it ends up not being sustainable. And so you get a lot of pushback in the organization. And it doesn't matter if you're using SAFe, LESS, Nexus, program level, Agile program management, hybrids, whatever, everything that was on the list way up at one of those first slides, it ends up being structure oriented, tool set oriented, method oriented, framework oriented in that sense, not in a negative sense, but it's there. And it gives you some of the structure that is needed in order to be able to get things done. And that gives you the rituals and the discipline, or yeah, in order to be able to get things done, okay? And so at the team level, it works great. It's when you start going beyond team level and try to do huge efforts that it gets really messy. But what I've observed is that a lot of times tools end up driving behavior instead of behavior driving tools. And I just think that that's sort of what's happened in the Agile world during the last 10 to 15 years. I don't think they meant to have all these different tools because remember, it's processes over tools if we're looking at the Agile Manifesto. And or processes and tools are on the one side and it's interactions on the other side. And so anyways, that is, I think, a key thing that people miss is that if you're only taking a tool set view, you've increased your risk for failure. Okay, so and that's why I put the mindset as a separate thing. You need leadership, you need flow, you need vision, cascading vision, where the vision cascades down and is linked back up through the organization. Most organizations try to cascade their vision. Some do it well, some don't do it well at all. With the mindset, you want internal behavior that is leading your transformation. So autonomy, mastery, and purpose, those are intrinsic motivators. And so that represents mindset. So I really like what Daniel Pink has done in his book. And so in transformation, it's not just doing the structure, it's also doing the training, coaching, and mentoring over and over and over again in order to build up the individuals and the teams and the programs and the portfolios. This is why it can take years to do a transformation. The bigger the company, the more time it's going to take. And if you want to do it quickly, Ericsson did a great example of being able to transform an entire division, but they had at least 10 external coaches and 30 or 40 internal coaches that worked together in order to do the transformation. They did it about 10, 11 years ago. And that transformation is still going, okay? And so if you're going to do, and that was, I don't remember exactly how many thousands of employees that was. I think it was around 5, might be 15, I don't remember. But it was many thousands of employees that they had doing that transformation. And they had to have a lot of coaches working with a lot of teams, working with the scrum masters and the product owners and the team members to bring them up that curve. And even to this day, 11 years later, you still see that is still being propelled forward by the successive generations of people that have joined the company. And as we mentioned in the survey, culture was one of the key things that the companies were struggling with. And that gets right back down into values and attitudes. And so if the belief isn't driving the behavior, it really doesn't matter what structure you use. Okay. If the people don't believe in what you're doing, it's really going to hamstring your efforts. So as I put over here on the right-hand side, it's a both and view, not an either or. Now, you'll notice that in the structure, sometimes you'll have to address rollout. And then the other thing that I purposely left out of this presentation is governance, because that's a whole nother animal and requires a lot more explanation of how to do that in an agile way. And so it's really both tool set and mindset. If you're only doing tool set, you're at super high risk of failing. And when you look at the summary slide that we had up there on slide 6, with all of those, I'll pop back to that right now. When you look at this and you see 16 of 18 areas that are basically either really gasping for air or basically dying, it's reflected in exactly what we're talking about. You can see that the emphasis has been on the tool set, and that I can bet you 10 to 1 that mindset was neglected. Hans, did you have anything that you wanted to add, or did I miss anything in this section?
No, but I think you're capturing it very, very good. And same in most cases, transformation and digital transformation and so on is a people issue. It's a people sport. And we need to recognize that it's the people, leadership, and culture that determines the effects and success rates of transformation. It's not a set of tools and processes, it's the people. So I think that you have captured it very, very well.
Very good. Good to hear. Once in a while I get something close to right. And, you know, all frameworks are wrong, but some are useful. And so what I found interesting, and many of you have probably seen the Agile Onion. So I wanted to talk about Agile Onion from a tool set perspective, and then Agile Onion from a leadership perspective. Once again, in the beginning, I was a little harsh and I said, oh, that's totally wrong on the Agile side, because I was looking at it from a leadership perspective, but they both have their place. And they're both coming at it from a different direction. In the end, hopefully they meet and actually work. You've got, with the Agile Onion, they start with tools and processes. And as I just explained, if you start with tools and processes and ignore mindset from the beginning, you're never going to get to the mindset. That's my view, okay? Because you got tools and practices, practices, principles, values, and then mindset. And from a leadership perspective, it's actually totally flipped around. And I know Joel's in the conversation right now, and he's probably grinning ear to ear, because Joel and I, we had worked together on a project, and we were having a conversation with another well-known Agilist in Stockholm, trying to help them understand where we were coming from, but we hadn't drawn the Agile Onion in reverse. We said it was in reverse, we just didn't draw it that way. So it's actually for if you're using just the tool set view, you can do the Agile Onion just like it looks like on the left-hand side. And it's probably required if you're doing program management, and it requires program management skills. If you're not trained in program management and you don't know what you're doing, even traditional program management, you're going to be at a very high risk again for going down in flames because of how this is structured. And again, it's not an either or. One's not better than the other. It's just that they're both required. And so you got to use both at once in order to be successful. And so implementing the mindset requires leadership skills and signaling, how you signal that through the organization. And so it begins with the mindset, and from the mindset, you develop the values. And from the values, you develop the principles. And from the principles, you get to the process. And eventually, then you should be looking at, okay, what tools make sense for us as an organization? And so I see that we have a couple of questions here. I'm going to look at these real quick. Jeremy asked back on the summary slide, could this dotted line be an example of dotted line here? Could that be an example of command and control? Great observation, Jeremy, because in reality, I'd have to say, yeah, because if they're personally involved, but they're not exhibiting servant leadership, the opposite to servant leadership is probably command and control. So that's a really excellent observation. And Matt just shared a question as well. You peel the onion from the outside in, so I think you should start with mindset on the outside. And again, that could be very well correct as well. I just think that from a starting point for leadership and inspiring the teams and getting your values, principles, and practices in place, you got to start with the idea. It's the 4D model: definitions, distill agreement, then you deliver, and then you drive to success. And so this is sort of a reflection of what we would call the 4D model in flow. So again, on the left-hand side, tools are driving the behavior. On the right-hand side, mindset is driving the behavior. And if you're going to succeed, you got to do both at the same time. You can't neglect one or the other, because if you do that, then you're basically going to be in big trouble. Cool. And I see Joel also mentioned that, yeah, that was his remembrance as well about these agile onions. Cool. Hey, we're doing pretty good time-wise. This is great. Okay, now Hans is going to give us some examples and then the process that we use. So I'm going to punt back over to Hans and let him continue.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. I think you have summarized quite well. That, I mean, this kind of transformation that we see requires both tools and mindsets to succeed in some way. What we've done is that we try to summarize this whole flow framework into a number of tools that we can use to make an assessment or diagnostics of the organization itself, to see exactly where the challenges are. What are the problems that we see, and what would you need to do now to boost sort of the performance of the Scaled Agile? And for that reason, we have defined 3 different tools that we use. So it's a flow maturity model that actually can assess the complete organization from this flow perspective, that the tools and the mindset of how we work. The power of one to get the right focus of what we're doing. It's so easy when we start this transformation that we try to sort of dig somewhere where we're quite comfortable, that it comes more or less a technology problem rather than a mindset problem or cultural leadership problem, for example. And then finally, we have a methodology of doing a friction analysis, both on individuals, but also team, product, and organizational level, to see exactly what kind of level of flow is there in the organization? Where is the problem actually in actually delivering flow? And we can see that there are quite diverse position of organizations and team, for example, in that kind of matrix, the assessment that we do. We did an example, a customer example with a telecom company. This was a few weeks ago we did this, and we sensed that they had a problem with getting the full effect of Scaled Agile. They're using SAFe, and they were talking very much about that they could not really identify what was the actual problem itself that hindered them to get a full effect of the Scaled Agile, the SAFe. There were a lot of discussions about what it could be, and they saw symptoms in the organizations that they somehow needed to assess and analyze. So we actually did this flow maturity assessment with them and had a discussion around how things actually worked in their organization. And this is the picture that we received from doing this. So we assessed a number of areas where we with them. First of all was the common vision, where we talked about the cascading of the vision. Does everybody understand this, the same understanding of the purpose and vision of what we're doing? The one language, having the right meaning and definitions of different concepts and words that we use. The next one is, I cannot see it, it's so small.
Value, vision.
Value and vision, is that in place when we actually delivering things? We have the value curve management. We actually had a way of measuring what we're doing today. So we can actually see the effects of what we're doing. The flow governance, that we have the decision boards, the roles and responsibility clear in an organization, and then the leadership coaching to inspire and drive the teams in the organization itself. And this is the picture we got from that. And we got a quite low maturity of 58%. And we can also identify areas of improvements. And the interesting part is when we did this assessment is that actually reflected exactly the problem they have seen and thought about, but could not really concretize. So this gave them a really nice picture to see where they needed to start in order to boost the performance of Scaled Agile. If you go to the next slide, this is actually what came out of it, this assessment. We talked very much about what was working well with the PI planning and the bottom-up approach, but there were a number of challenges that were raised in the organization that we could get a common view on. They agreed that this was the problem, and they also agreed on a number of priorities going forward. These are the things that we need to do within 6 months to actually boost the performance of the Scaled Agile and improving the maturity itself. So this gave them a little bit of tool to get the common picture of where they were, what they need to do, recognize the benefits they've had, but also the challenges and as a gain the way forward. You can go to the next slide. This is also stuff we did. This is the flow, the friction analysis that we did with them as well, because we recognized there was something wrong in actually work streams, the teams itself, in doing this. So we actually used the vision right people and the 4D to actually describe how things were working in this team itself. And we look at it from three different perspectives. This is the suitable, feasible, and acceptable, to see really how the things were working in the organization. And when we did this and actually finalized the assessment, we also got the feedback that it actually represented very, very well how things were looking in the organization. And that this gave the management team something to discuss, prioritize, and work with to improve the effectiveness and performance of the team itself. And we can here also list the maturity of this team itself. We can list some percentages of each of the areas, how they look like, and also the analysis and conclusion. And this was quite a very good tool to actually prioritize and make some sort of roadmap to improve the performance of Scaled Agile itself. If you go to next.
Before we go to the next slide, maybe you could also explain why there's 2 dots on some and 1 dot on another for both of
definitely,
these.
Definitely. Usually we have 3 dots. We have yellow, green, yellow, and red, and they're described there on top. But in some cases, the people in the management teams do not agree whether it should be a red or yellow. Instead of battling it out in the team itself, we agree that they put it as a yellow-red. So it's as a combination of that, which gives a little bit more clarity.
Exactly, just in case anybody was wondering about that.
Mm.
Cool.
So this is when we then look at this flow assessment of friction analysis itself. We look at it from 2 different perspectives. The first one is on the x-axis is distillation and delivery, how well it actually delivers in the organization. So it has very strong delivery if on the high scale. And on the y-axis, we have the vision and flow clarity. This is actually having the right vision, understanding, and objectives of what you're doing. So we see here that when we did the analysis of the team, it's in the middle. So it's actually both having a little bit unclear vision about where they're going and also having a weak delivery itself. So it was quite struggling in both of these fields to deliver the right result. So by improving removing the friction from the previous slide, we can actually move them up to the flow corner where they have the right vision, but also very strong delivery in the flow corner. So this gives a very graphical representation of where they are positioned.
Yeah, and I like this one. It's really powerful because about a year and a half, 2 years ago, Joel and I were also working on a project together. And I think he'll recognize the company. He knows who it is. But it's basically, they had what I would consider really good teams that they could just shoot the work out. They had been trained by one of the top agile companies in Sweden. We were coming in for an agile reboot. Excuse me. And so they had incredibly strong delivery, but what they were delivering, the business kept pushing back and saying, that's not what we asked for. And so that meant that there was a really strong disconnect for the leadership. And when we tried to help the leadership to understand that, we got a lot of pushback. And so that's another 2-hour discussion. But we've used this multiple times with multiple companies. And sometimes they are able to look at it and objectively go, oh, okay, yeah, this is us. And they react and they take corrective action. Many times they just go, oh, we'll delegate that down to the team and we'll have them fix it. And that doesn't work. So, but anyways, yeah, sorry, keep going. You keep going, Hans. So were we done with this slide?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's a very powerful tool to actually map the different teams into this quadrant a matrix and see actually where they're positioned and where they need to go. It gives a very true and honest view about how they perform.
Yeah. And what's interesting is sometimes the product owners, the team will have one view, and I don't see Bob on the call today, but if he were he could give a great example about where the team and the product owner weren't in agreement with with each other about where they were at in this particular picture. We had used a slightly different way to go through the flow anti-flow, but it was basically the same result. Matt was asking, he's pointing out that vision and clarity includes distillation. That would probably be correct because you have to define and distill, get that agreement, and that's how you get rid of the politics. The reason we had distillation and delivery there is the example that I'm giving, where the team had one understanding, the product owner and even the stakeholders had two other understandings. So the distillation wasn't there. Technically, you could put the 4D model right here at the bottom. So, and I like what Matt is mentioning here in the questions about you can use these in the retrospectives. These are really powerful. If you do it like once a month to begin with, the team can start to see if they're making progress. And once you see that progress in the right direction, up the curve, whichever way it goes, then you can switch to a quarterly check-in to see, are we getting towards what we want to achieve with flow? So those were really good points, Matt. Thank you.
Okay, so what did we do? So what we saw in the survey itself was that 80% of the organizations or digital professionals are struggling severely to implement flow and also to measure the effect of flow, and also identified a number of capability and competences that are hindering the implementation in flow. So what we try to do in our approach and the process itself is actually to mitigate those problems by focusing on them early in the process itself, either when you start up a Scaled Agile product itself, or when you want to somehow boost it or change the approach that you're doing. So the first step that we suggest is actually do a mapping exercise. And here we have the different tools that we use, both the Scale Agile and friction analysis that I've shown you that we did with a telecom company. And it gives the team or the organization the same picture about where they are, what the problems are that they need to mitigate in some way. It can also start looking at what are the effects of this. The second thing we propose is actually doing some sort of baseline. And we have what we call a digital balance scorecard that we look at to look at the different dimensions. For example, look at the governance parts, the value creation to business or to customers, look at the internal effectiveness, and also looking at the culture itself. So we can look at these 4 domains to see that they are actually improving and do a baseline and see how that progresses over time. And I would also suggest that might be a little bit more complicated, but do culture mapping. So we have tools to do culture mapping in collaboration with a Norwegian company, which is really, really powerful. And it gives really accurate analysis about how the culture actually works on multiple levels. The second phase goes more or less into the analyze, and prioritize. So here we want to take the mapping information, analyze why this is the case, what do we want to achieve, why are we in this situation, and what do we need to do. So the first thing that we do is actually the power of one, to look at, okay, what is the main challenge that we want to do? How do we actually strengthen the overall objective or the vision of the company? Where is the problem itself, and how does it relate to the mapping we've done? The second one is more or less, okay, why do we need to prioritize? We will have tons of different ideas about how to improve the Scale Agile, but we need some sort of way to prioritize and create a roadmap or backlog for the next 6 months, so we have a clear roadmap how to go. And the third one, I think, cannot be underestimated, and that is change management. As we talked about before, this is very much about people and change. It's about leadership and change. And therefore, we need to understand how do we change the mindset of people so they are accepting this change itself. The third phase is really about execution, but also accelerating the performance of Scaled Agile and harvesting the benefits. So here we actually start executing the transformation backlog or roadmap. We measure the effects continuously to see exactly how they increase over time. If they don't increase, we are probably doing something wrong. We might be having a wrong analysis. We might have the wrong priority in some way, but measuring so we're doing the right thing, and then also reflect and learn to see, okay, could we do anything better? And what we see here, following this process and these different steps and different activities, we see that we can mitigate these 87% of failure or severe problems. And we can also mitigate the problem of not having measurements, measuring the effects of Scale Agile. And we can also mitigate many of the capabilities that are hindering us to get the full effect itself. And when we start to remove these kind of risks and challenges, we see that the performance will increase rapidly. And we've seen cases that Andrew have done that's actually increased 300% in performance, which is remarkable. But that is actually doing that by doing it in a structured way, understanding where are the challenges, why do we have them, what kind of obstacles do we have, and removing them one by one so we increase the success rate of Scale Agile.
Yeah, that's really good, because the 300% that Hans is mentioning as one of the examples, it's actually a really good one. I don't see Jay on the call, but he's one of the few people that I'm aware of who's doing a safe implementation where they're succeeding. Jay sat in on Ted's and my training for Flow about 5 years ago, and we didn't know they were already doing Agile. So he had teams that were good at doing Agile. He went back, and Flow is a leadership umbrella that sits above all the frameworks and all the methodologies that you're using, and it helps them play nice together. But Jay took flow, it took us at our word, and went back and applied the principles of flow. And in 90 days, he got a 300% increase in productivity on teams already doing Agile. And since then, not only have they done that, they've added SAFe plus Flow, and they're one of the few organizations I'm aware of that it does SAFe and does it really well. Okay, so SAFe by itself, without a leadership framework, you're going to struggle. Many of you who are in the Stockholm area, if you were in Stockholm a couple years ago and were invited to one of the SAFe powwows that they had, where they bring in the VIPs from SAFe. They brought in Jennifer Lawrence, not the actress, but the person that actually does the curriculum for the SAFe training. And she presented on the soft skills. And basically what she presented covered roughly 60-70% of what we would do in flow. And I'm going to get to that in a second on the next slide. But it was just very interesting to me that even the top people in SAFe are saying SAFe as a framework's not enough. You have to have all the soft skills, all the leadership skills in order to be able to make SAFe work correctly. And if the executives aren't with, oh my goodness, it's going to be extremely painful. So everybody has to be within the journey. If they're not within the journey, it's going to hurt. I don't know any nicer way to say it. I have a bunch of other ways I could say it, but I'll keep it to that right now. By the way, back to the prioritization right there in the middle of this slide. For those that work at one of the automotive companies, I see that they're attending today. Inside, you guys have a TED Talk type thing that's internal. You actually have a talk or a presentation by TED from about almost a year and a half ago on the power of prioritization. And it's about an hour-long presentation, if I remember right. It's in your equivalent of the TED Talk system internally for your company. It would be really good for you to take a look at that one again in light of what we've shared with all the results that we got from the survey and how we would mitigate what you're up against. By the way, just as a reminder for everybody who joined a little bit later, we're recording this. We're going to share the full recording. We're going to do a cut down 5-minute summary of the highlights. And we're also going to share the whole slide deck. So you'll have access to this after today's session and meetup. It's interesting that we had 18 areas in the survey. The first question is, what type of framework do you use? And the last question was, what's your one thing? And then we had 18 questions in the middle there of a whole bunch of areas. They don't match one-to-one to this screen here. As I mentioned, I talked about the 4 whys. This follows the flow formula: vision plus right people plus the 4D model equals flow. And so for the area of vision, we have what we call tiles, or if you were the plate spinner at the circus that spins the plates and you have them on the sticks, you have to spin 18 plates at once to be successful in whatever transformation you're trying to do. Okay. And so we have things like the 4 whys, and that goes right to the vision. Simon Sinek says start with why, but even Simon Sinek is now saying start with vision. And we've been saying that for 25 years. You got the flow friction analysis, which is an incredibly powerful tool at the individual and team level to be able to help people walk through. Do we have confusion? Do we have anxiety? Do we have politics? And all these different areas, and which part of this formula do you use in order to be able to mitigate what you're up against? VSPT is part of the cascading vision, but it's also the West Point Military Academy leadership framework from the mid-90s. And so we modified it. They had vision, strategy, projects, and tactics. We modified it to vision, strategy, people, and tasks. And it all boils down to that. And as Hans has emphasized over and over again, it's all about people. Cascading vision, I'm not going to go deep into that. I've already mentioned it. We have anticipatory vision using a Stacy diagram. We could use a Cynefin format. This is actually the Stacy diagram here on the left is the traditional one, and the one on the right is for anticipatory vision. Culture. In culture, we include things like the vision, the purpose, the values and attitudes, strategy, and things like that to get you down to the goals and objectives that you're trying to achieve. But all of those things are part of your culture. As Claus already showed, we had the flow, anti-flow formula that we use. And here we just have delivery and vision. So it's a simplified version of that. In the ninth tile here, we've got Agile coaching and management consulting. We've got a really long presentation on that. And then individuals and stakeholder management, how we manage our stakeholders. And all 9 of these have to do with vision. For right people in the 4D model, we have the 4R model, which mirrors the 4D model. So right truth, right values and attitudes, right actions, right results. And the vision is always in the middle. And the 4D model here at the bottom in the middle, it's define, distill, deliver, and drive. And I won't go into those. And in the middle here, we have the roles, and we touch a little bit more on that. And then getting to flow, these last 6 tiles are primarily about measurement and measuring, at least these 3 here in the bottom right corner, 15, 17, and 18. That's all about measurement. And then getting to flow is transforming people up the AHA curve, going from struggling to going through the motions, hitting AHA, getting to perform, and then to hyper performance. And the reason transformations take so long is you got to take everybody through that curve individually as a team for the products, programs, processes, line management, and ultimately then for the leadership and the whole organization. And so that's why we do the 4 box in each of these areas for all 4 areas. And then unifying these, and this is actually the first tile. We start with number 1 over here, and then it goes sequentially for the balance. This is the base for everything that we do. It's people, it's teams, it's the products, programs, processes, all of those types of things, the middle managers, line managers, and so on. And then this last box for organization, that's portfolio all the way up to the C-suite. And the U in the middle is to have a unified vision. And it's also the path that we take. It goes both directions, both top down and bottom up. And so that it's a both and again, it's not an either or. So if you're trying to grow things organically and you're struggling, and a lot of times they'll try to do safe from only a bottom up perspective, that's going to hurt. You have to have the leadership with, and they have to be with on the journey, not just talking the talk, but actually walking the talk. And so these are the 18 key areas that we would use. These are all of the tools, methodologies, and many of these have ways that we measure. We can measure using a AHA curve. We can measure using more traditional like measurements for velocity and things like that. And then team health and other types of spider graphs. All of those are incredibly useful for helping to get your teams up the curve from struggling up to hyper performance. And one of the biggest ahas for me here about 10 years ago, working for Nature Publishing Group, is you don't have to have everybody in the journey. in order to double the effect of the entire organization. And that is really important. You only need a little bit of movement up that curve by each of the individuals and team, and suddenly you'll see immediate impact and immediate results. And that's what Hans was alluding to when he was saying, you do these things, you're going to get probably minimum a 300% increase on what the teams are doing. And we've seen that proven over and over and over and over again. So that's pretty well known in the Agile community.
Yeah, but I think it is beautifully summarized. I mean, I think that what Andrew is saying, that there's so many approaches and tools that we can use to actually boost performance, and but we'll still recognize the process we set up, and that we can populate it with these different tools and modules to actually get the right performance for that specific case. So yeah, it's really powerful to marry all these things together to get the right approach and do the assessments and everything.
Exactly. Cool. I think we're opening it up for questions and answers. And if you had any questions, or I've been trying to keep up with your questions as you've been putting them over here in the chat, so that worked pretty well. So that's good to know. But did you have any questions? This is your chance to ask. And if you don't want to type, just unmute your mic and just go ahead and ask.
And then I can ask a question to the crowd and ask, the statistics or the facts that we presented here, do you think they're relevant? Do you think they are aligned with what you see in your organizations?
Was that a question out to the crowd?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we did get a question in here. I think I'll jump in and do that one. It says in the 4 square tiles, it asks, does this mean program portfolio, or can you comment on a product mindset? So I think what's being asked is what's included in each box, and maybe I went through it a little bit quickly. Individual, that's always autonomy, mastery, and purpose. With the team, that's basically how do you get the team into a state of flow. For the product and the product mindset, I like where that question's going, because the product mindset isn't just for the product owner. And I really like where you were going with this, Matt, because the product mindset is also necessary for the product owner, for the program managers, for line managers. It really goes into the roles and definitions here in tile number 12. What's my new role in an agile world? And as a servant leader, how do I support the teams in order to make them successful? And so separating out portfolio here in tile number 1 here, I would look at this as a product and program are primarily here in the lower right corner. Portfolio up to C-suite is in the organizational part. And but this is the 4 box that we use for the other 17 tiles. So it's fundamental and foundational to everything that we're trying to do. And as far as an agile mindset versus a product mindset, I think that they're the same thing, because unless you're thinking more traditional product management, then we're getting into my area, because I have an MBA in marketing. And I have been at war with the Agilists, telling them, look, I did a 2.5-year program, MBA in marketing, and you're telling me a product owner knows everything that they need to know after a 2-day product owner course? Don't take me there. You'll get me really going. So, so from a product management standpoint, you have a lot of people. There's 2 million MBAs that are graduate from university programs every year. And so when you look at the total number of Agilists out there versus the number of MBAs are out there, the MBA army is much bigger, okay? And so it becomes a whole different discussion, so we won't go there. How can we go around a top-down or bottom-up resistance to transformation? As I said, the resistance is going to hit you. It could be in the middle layer because all of a sudden they feel that, oh boy, our job is threatened. They're not going to need me. It takes time. And this is why transformation takes time. It's individual by individual, team by team, product by product, program by program, line manager by line manager, and then portfolio by portfolio right up to the C-suite. And so that's why it's a both and, it's not an either or, okay? And so when I say top down, bottom up, it's at the same time. You got to do it all at once. If you're not doing it all at once and you're only trying to like grow things up organically, or somebody decided from that program product box to implement SAFe up into the team and individual level, it's going to create a lot of friction. And that's exactly what we saw in the survey as the number one problem.
I can add something there as well. I
Yeah,
need to leave very soon, but I think it's a matter of how to engage both the senior management and also the operational levels in the organization for the transformation, providing some sort of meaning and purpose of why we're doing this and what is their role in that, so they don't feel excluded in some way. They need to take full responsibility and accountability for the transformation. They cannot leave it for someone else to do. They need to be there and they need to be committed on all levels. So, and I think that is the main challenge. How do you get everybody committed to change?
Yeah.
So we don't get a top down or a bottom up resistance or approach.
Yeah, there's nothing, I agree. I absolutely agree. There's nothing more painful than trying to do a bottom up effort, because then it becomes a guerrilla warfare. And I would have to go through 30 years of political management, how you manage politics, in order to you manage, or you work with the level that you're at, and then you try to influence up. When you have to do that, it just takes so much longer. Then you're talking 5 years, 7 years to get anything done. So it just becomes extremely painful. Hey, Hans, if you have to drop out, that's awesome. Really appreciate everything that you did on this one and your input today. So I think I'll hang out a few more. There was a question if they could share this with one of the Tekniska Högskola. That's totally fine. We're going to be putting this out there. This recording will be available publicly. And so people will be able to share this with whoever you would like to share. And as I mentioned, there'll be a 5-minute summary taking the best of this last almost hour and a half. And then we're going to do the full recording will be there so that people can look at it. And remember, this is also coming from our view and our 25 years of working with how do you get things done? How do you actually deliver it? We were doing Agile long before it was called Agile, and we already have a couple books out there that have captured what it was that we did in order to succeed. So yes, feel free to share this link in the video with whoever. We'd be very happy for you guys to share this, and the same for the slide deck. If you use the slide decks or the slides, just at the very end, there's a Creative Commons license. For the copyright, just put used with permission and give us credit. And both Hans and I would really appreciate that. Cool. And it's really exciting that they're actually teaching Agile. Technical Högskola, that's sort of like college university level in Sweden, if I remember right. And so that they're teaching Agile at that level, that's really good. Any other questions before we wrap up? You can go ahead and unmute if you want. Well, if there are any questions afterwards, I'm going to turn off the recording now, and I would just, I guess we're in the Q&A. And on behalf of Hans and myself, just like to say thank you. It was great having you here today. It was great that people participated in the survey. I think it gives you guys insight into what you're up against when you're trying to do Scaled Agile. If you'd like to know more about flow, look me up. My website is andrewkallman.com. All the information about flow is there. And we have full training courses. We have a grueling 18-hour flow certified professional level. The flow coach level is the next level up from that. And that's 4 hours of additional training plus a 4-hour live session plus a case study in order to achieve the flow certified coach. And then for those of you who are really passionate about training, we have a flow certified trainer level. We have about 15 trainers, probably half of them here in Scandinavia, the other half in the US. And thank you to everybody who have to run to their next meetings. It was great having you here today. And we look forward to having you guys at our next meetup, which will be scheduled in the near future. Thanks, everyone.
Great, Andrew and Hans. Thanks very much.